My name is Margaret Pierce, and I will never forget the way my sister smiled at our mother's funeral. It wasn't a warm smile of remembrance or comfort. It was the kind that freezes your blood. A quiet, secret smile that said she already knew something the rest of us didn't. That smile stayed with me through the service, through the burial, and into the cold silence of the night. At the time, I didn't know it would lead me into courtrooms, lawyers' offices, and the kind of truth that splits a family in two. The morning of the funeral had started the way grief often does, quiet and mechanical. The sky over Indiana was that faded gray you only get in late October. I ironed my black dress without really seeing what I was doing. My hands moved on their own, just as they had in the final weeks of Mom's illness, changing her linens, pouring her water, answering her soft thank yous. Mom's house had always been simple white siding rose bushes by the porch and a kitchen table that could seat 6, even though it was usually just the 3 of us, Mom, my sister Diana, and me. But in those last weeks, Diana had barely come by. "Too much work," she said. "I'll visit this weekend." She always had a reason. When I pulled up to the church that morning, Diana's car, her shiny new SUV, was already parked out front. She was wearing a dark suit, pearls, and the kind of hat that made her look like she belonged at someone else's funeral, not our mother's. She hugged me briefly, careful not to smudge her lipstick, and whispered, "You're holding up well." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Detached, cold, like she was already done mourning. During the service, the pastor spoke about mercy and forgiveness. His voice was kind, but my eyes were on Diana. When he said, "She loved both her daughters dearly," Diana tilted her head slightly and smiled. Not a soft smile, a self-satisfied one. The kind of smile that made me clench my fists in my lap. I kept thinking about what our neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, had told me 2 days earlier. "Your mother seemed anxious about her will, dear. Said she needed to fix something, but wasn't feeling strong enough to drive." At the time, I brushed it off. We'd always trusted Diana to handle the paperwork. She was the organized one, the one who worked in finance. I was the caretaker, the sentimental one. Mom used to say, "Margaret has my heart, but Diana has my mind." I never realized how painful that phrase would become. After the burial, everyone gathered at the fellowship hall for sandwiches and coffee. I stood near the punch bowl, thanking neighbors for coming. Diana stayed close to the family lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, their voices low and secretive. When I walked by, their conversation stopped. Mr. Whitaker looked down at his cup. Diana gave me a quick, empty smile, the same one she'd worn beside the coffin. That night, I drove home to the farmhouse. The silence was so heavy, I could almost hear my mother's breath still echoing through the rooms. I lit a candle near her favorite chair and sat with her photo in my lap. The question kept circling in my mind. Why would Diana be smiling? I thought about our childhood, how Diana always took the biggest slice of pie, the newest dress, the front seat. She wasn't cruel, just entitled. She believed the world owed her more. And Mom, bless her heart, never stopped believing Diana would change. As I looked around the house, I noticed something on the bookshelf, Mom's old Bible, the one she'd kept by her bedside. Its pages were worn soft from her fingers. When I picked it up, an envelope slipped out, yellowed and sealed with my name written in her handwriting, to be read after my passing. My heart pounded as I broke the seal. Inside was a short letter written in shaky pen. "My dearest Margaret, if you are reading this, I am at peace. Please know that I love you and your sister equally, though she may not always show love the way you do. There is another document with Mr. Whitaker. I wanted fairness, not favoritism. Trust the light to show what is right." There was also a note-attached copy of revised will, signed October 3rd. But October 3rd was only a week before she passed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the letter spread before me, the edges trembling in my fingers. Diana had been the one to visit Mom that week. She'd brought flowers, handled the mail, and told everyone she was helping Mom finalize her affairs. The sunlight crept through the curtains and fell directly on the letter. The words glowed faintly, as though my mother herself was saying, "You know what you must do." I folded the note carefully and placed it back in the Bible. Tomorrow I would see Mr. Whitaker. Tomorrow I would find out exactly what was in that will and why Diana smiled at our mother's funeral. The next morning the sky was pale and streaked with light, but my stomach twisted with dread. I dressed slowly, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of my cardigan. The roads were slick with dew as I drove into town. Every mile closer to Whitaker & Sons Legal Services made my chest tighten. Mr. Whitaker had been our family's attorney for decades. A quiet man, gray-haired, deliberate, always careful with his words. When I arrived, he rose from behind his desk, offering a sympathetic smile. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. "I was expecting your sister this afternoon. You're here early." I held out the envelope. "I found this in Mom's Bible last night." His expression changed, not shock exactly, but concern. He read the front, then the note inside, and sighed. "Your mother did indeed prepare a revision of her will earlier this month. She asked me to draft it, but..." He hesitated. "When she passed the copy she signed was missing. The only one we had on file was the earlier version. The one that leaves everything to Diana," I said. He nodded reluctantly. "Yes, the house, the savings, even the old truck. She said Diana would know what to do with it." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of his desk. "Are you telling me someone took that second will?" He hesitated again, eyes darting toward the window. "Your sister came by the office 3 days before your mother passed. She said your mother was revising her estate plan, but wanted it kept private until after the funeral. I handed her the signed document to deliver for your mother's review." The world went quiet. "And it was never returned," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "I assumed she would bring it back once things settled. I didn't want to cause trouble between you two." Trouble. That word burned. I stood there in silence, my heart thudding in my ears. I thanked him, gathered my purse, and walked out to my car without another word. The drive home felt endless. Every field, every mailbox along the road seemed to blur past in shades of gray. By the time I reached the house, the coffee I'd bought was cold. I set it on the counter and stared at the window. Sunlight spilling across the sink, just like it had the morning Mom died. I pulled out the letter again and read it until the words blurred. "Trust the light to show what is right." That evening, I called Nancy Caldwell, Mom's neighbor and oldest friend. "Nancy," I said, my voice shaking, "do you remember seeing Diana the week before Mom passed?" "Oh, yes," Nancy said immediately. "She came by with papers and a briefcase. I remember because your mama was crying afterward. She said something about how she hoped both her girls would forgive her decisions. I thanked her, but my hands were trembling as I hung up. There was no denying it. Now Diana had done something. I didn't sleep much that week. I started looking through Mom's files, tax forms, checkbooks, bank statements. I noticed one odd withdrawal 2 days before her death, $2,000 in cash. Mom never took out large sums. She lived on her pension and Social Security, careful with every dollar. The withdrawal slip had Diana's signature on it. By Friday, I'd had enough. I drove to Diana's house, a wide suburban 2-story, with manicured hedges and a flag fluttering on the porch. I stood there for a long time before ringing the bell. She opened the door wearing yoga pants and holding a mug that said, "Blessed." Her expression froze when she saw me. "Margaret, you could have called." "I found Mom's letter," I said flatly. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She set the mug down carefully. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. The will, the revision she signed, the one you were supposed to deliver." Her face hardened. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Margaret." Mom was confused. She changed her mind a dozen times in those last weeks. The earlier will was the valid one. Mr. Whitaker confirmed it. I stepped closer. "He confirmed you took the new one and it disappeared." "Did you think no one would find out?" Her jaw tightened. "You've always been dramatic. You think you're the victim because you took care of her. But I was the one paying the bills, making sure she could keep that house. Don't turn this into a spectacle." I laughed, a sound that came out more like a sob. "You call it a spectacle. I call it stealing from your own mother." Her eyes flashed. "Watch yourself. If you drag this into court, you'll embarrass the whole family. Then maybe it's time someone did." I turned and walked down the steps before she could respond. The air was cold sharp with the smell of wet leaves. I got in my car and sat there shaking. For years, I'd let Diana have her way. Birthdays, holidays, family decisions, all in the name of peace. But not this time. The next morning, I returned to Mr. Whitaker's office with Mom's letter and Nancy's statement. He read them both and leaned back. "If your mother's handwriting and the witness's memory hold up, we can petition to reopen probate. It won't be easy, but it's your right." I looked out the window. The morning sun was rising, lighting the rooftops of town. Somewhere in that light, I thought of my mother's face, tired, kind, and full of hope. "Do it," I said quietly. "Let the truth come to light." He nodded. "It will take time. Be prepared, your sister won't go quietly." I smiled faintly. Neither will I. That night, I placed the Bible back on the shelf. The letter was safely inside, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without tears. Because I finally knew what my mother meant. Sometimes the sunlight doesn't just warm you, it exposes what's been hiding too long in the dark. The first hearing was set for mid-December. The courthouse stood on the corner of Main and Birch, a red brick building that had seen generations of family disputes, property lines, divorces, inheritances, all the quiet wars that tore people apart behind polite smiles. I sat on the wooden bench in the hallway that morning, clutching my purse like a shield. Across from me, Diana scrolled through her phone legs, crossed pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She didn't look nervous. She looked annoyed. When Mr. Whitaker arrived, he gave me a reassuring nod. "Remember, Margaret," he whispered, "truth doesn't shout, it stands." The clerk called our case and we walked into the courtroom. It smelled faintly of dust and old books. Judge Ramsey, an older man with silver hair and steady eyes, presided from the bench. He looked at us like he'd seen this story 1,000 times before sisters' wills and too much pride between them. Diana's attorney, a younger man in an expensive suit, opened first. "Your Honor, my client is the rightful beneficiary of her late mother's estate, as per the signed and filed will dated September 23rd. The opposing party has no legal standing, merely an emotional grievance." I clenched my jaw but stayed quiet. Then Mr. Whitaker rose. His voice was calm but firm. "Your Honor, we have discovered a letter from the deceased indicating a subsequent will signed on October 3rd, which was never filed. We also have testimony from a neighbor who witnessed an exchange between the deceased and the defendant in that same week." The judge leaned forward. "And you're suggesting the revised will was intentionally withheld?" Mr. Whitaker nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Diana's lawyer scoffed. Preposterous. There's no proof this alleged revision even existed. And even if it did, it was never filed. This is a family misunderstanding, not a legal matter. But the judge wasn't convinced. Let's hear from Mrs. Pierce, he said. My heart pounded as I stood. My knees trembled slightly, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. Your Honor, I said softly. My mother wrote me a letter. It was in her Bible. She mentioned the second will and said she trusted the light to show what was right. That's her handwriting, and I have witnesses who can confirm it. He gestured for the bailiff to take the envelope. As he read it silently, sunlight streamed through the high courtroom windows, landing right on the judge's desk. It was the same soft, slanted morning light that had fallen across Mom's bed the day she died. After a long pause, he looked up. This letter seems genuine. He turned to Diana. Mrs. Collins. She used her married name. Did you have possession of this second will at any point? Diana's jaw tightened. I don't recall, Your Honor. My mother was confused at the end. She may have imagined signing something new. The judge raised an eyebrow. So you deny ever receiving a revised document from Mr. Whitaker? Her silence lasted too long. Even her lawyer glanced at her uneasy. I may have taken something for her to review, she admitted finally. But I don't remember it being signed. Whitaker spoke quickly. Your Honor, the deceased's handwriting and signature on the attached note match the known samples we provided. We respectfully request a handwriting analysis and a stay on all asset transfers until the matter is resolved. Judge Ramsey nodded slowly. Granted. The estate will remain frozen until we determine the authenticity of the documents. We'll reconvene in 3 weeks. He struck the gavel once, and just like that, it was over for now. Outside, the winter air bit at my cheeks. Diana caught up with me on the courthouse steps. Are you happy now? She hissed. You've humiliated us in front of half the town. I stopped, turned to her. You humiliated yourself. You could have just told the truth. Her eyes flashed. You always play the St. Margaret. But you're no better than me. You just hide behind that tired, righteous face. I took a slow breath. Maybe, but at least I can sleep at night. For a moment, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she turned sharply and stalked toward her car. The sound of her heels on the pavement echoed like gunshots. That evening, I sat by the kitchen window, a mug of tea warming my hands. I thought about Mom, how she'd love to sit here too, watching the sunset through the trees. She used to say sunlight tells the truth if you let it in. I'd always thought it was just one of her sayings, but now I felt its weight. 3 weeks dragged on. During that time, I went through more of Mom's papers, old letters, receipts, journals. In one of her diaries tucked between pages about her garden, I found an entry dated October 3rd. It said simply, "Sign the new papers today." Diana insisted I rest afterward. I hope Margaret will understand someday. I stared at those words for a long time. Mom wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was doing, and Diana had made sure that signature never saw daylight. At the next hearing, the handwriting expert confirmed the authenticity. The judge set a full trial date. I remember sitting there as Diana's face went pale, her polished calm finally cracking. When court adjourned, she walked past me without a word. But I noticed something. Her hands were trembling. The same trembling I'd seen at the funeral when she read Mom's name. The same tremor that betrayed the smile she'd tried to hide behind. That night, I stood outside under the winter sky, looking up at the stars. The air was sharp and still. I thought about how revenge doesn't always mean rage or ruin. Sometimes it's just refusing to let lies stand. The truth was finally out in the open, and for the first time since Mom's death, I felt her peace returning to me quiet and steady, like sunlight through glass. The trial began on a cold January morning. Snow lined the courthouse steps, melting under the weak sun. I parked in the same spot as before, next to the oak tree whose branches hung bare and brittle. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and paper, that sterile scent of justice and dust. Diana was already seated when I entered. Her hair was pinned perfectly, and she wore a dark red suit, a bold choice as if she wanted to stand out. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and she smiled slightly, that same quiet, practiced smile I'd seen at the funeral. But this time, it looked thinner, fragile. Mr. Whitaker placed the Bible and letter on the table in front of us. He had grown quieter these past few weeks, but his focus was unwavering. "Remember," he said under his breath, "don't let her draw you into emotion. Let the truth do the talking." The courtroom filled slowly, a few townspeople, curious neighbors, even Mrs. Caldwell, who gave me a small nod of support from the back row. Judge Ramsey entered and took his seat, the bailiff calling for order. The opening statements felt like a blur. Diana's lawyer painted her as the dutiful daughter who had only wanted to protect her mother's interests. The plaintiff, he said, pointing briefly toward me, is acting out of grief and resentment. Mr. Whitaker rose calm and deliberate. "Your Honor, this is not a case of grief. It's a case of concealment. The deceased's handwritten note, corroborated by witness statements, shows clear intent to divide her estate equally between her daughters and to donate a portion to her church. That will was signed, and then it vanished." He held up the letter, the edges yellow under the light. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the truth takes time to find daylight." When I took the stand, I could feel Diana's eyes on me, cold and sharp. My throat tightened, but I spoke slowly. Mom loved us both. She trusted Diana with her papers. I never questioned that. But she also trusted that the will she signed would be honored. I only want what she wanted, nothing more. Then came Mrs. Caldwell's turn. Her voice trembled slightly as she told the court about the day Diana visited Mom alone. "Your mother looked uneasy afterward," she said. "She told me she'd signed something new, but she wasn't sure it would ever reach where it needed to." The courtroom was silent. Diana's lawyer tried to dismiss it as an old woman's recollection, but even the judge frowned. Then Mr. Whitaker presented the handwriting analysis, confirming the October 3rd signature matched all of Mom's previous documents. The evidence was strong, but not yet final. When Diana was called to the stand, she walked slowly, her heels echoing on the wooden floor. I watched her closely, her posture stiff, her expression carefully neutral. But her fingers, they trembled just slightly as she raised her right hand to swear in. "Mrs. Collins," the judge began, "did you at any time take possession of the revised will signed by your mother?" She hesitated. I delivered it to her house for review. I thought she wanted me to hold on to it." "Did you ever return it?" "I don't recall," she murmured. Mr. Whitaker stood. "Your Honor, we have found an email from the defendant to this office dated October 2nd, confirming receipt of the new will and stating, quote, 'I'll bring it back after Mom reviews it.'" The courtroom shifted. I heard someone whisper in the back row. Diana's lips parted slightly, her color draining. "That email was never followed up," Whitaker continued, "and the document vanished." The judge leaned back. "Mrs. Collins, what happened to that will?" Diana swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe Mother misplaced it." Do you expect this court to believe, he said gently, that a dying woman misplaced the single most important document of her life? Silence. Her lawyer objected, but it was too late. The image had already formed of a daughter taking advantage of her mother's weakness. I looked at Diana then, and for a fleeting moment I saw not my rival, not my betrayer, but the sister I'd once shared a bedroom with, whispering secrets under a patchwork quilt. For a heartbeat, I almost pitied her. But then she looked up at me and her eyes hardened again. The pity dissolved. The judge sighed. I'll reserve judgment until the final review of all materials, but I advise both parties to prepare for my ruling within the week. In the meantime, the estate remains frozen. He struck the gavel. The sound echoed like thunder. Outside, the winter light was almost blinding. As I stepped down the courthouse stairs, I turned back and saw Diana still inside, sitting motionless as her lawyer gathered his papers. Her hands covered her face. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. Mr. Whitaker joined me on the steps. "It's almost over," he said quietly. "Almost," I answered. When I drove home, the sun was already sinking behind the fields. I parked by the old barn and sat there watching the last light fade, feeling both heavy and light at once. I thought about what Mom had said in her last lucid moment. "Promise me you'll forgive her someday." At the time, I couldn't answer, but now maybe I was beginning to understand what she meant. The next morning, I received a call from Mr. Whitaker. "The judge has requested both of you return tomorrow," he said. "He's ready to make his decision." I hung up and stared at the sunlight spilling through my curtains, thin, gentle, and warm. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what it might reveal. The next morning, the courthouse felt different, quieter somehow, as if even the walls were holding their breath. I arrived early, a habit I'd picked up from years of teaching at the elementary school. Old teachers never lose their sense of punctuality. I sat in the back pew of the courtroom, my purse on my lap, and tried to still my hands. Diana came in 10 minutes later. No red suit today she wore. Gray understated her hair pulled into a low bun. For once she didn't look like she was on display. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. Mr. Whitaker leaned close. "I've seen judges delay rulings for less," he whispered. "But Ramsey seems decisive. Whatever happens today, keep your head high." The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Ramsey entered his robe, moving like a curtain of black smoke. He settled into his chair and shuffled through his notes. "We're here to conclude the matter of the estate of Eleanor Pierce. Deceased," he began. "I've reviewed the testimony, the documents, and the handwriting reports." He paused, eyes lifting toward us. "And I've come to a decision." The air seemed to vanish from the room. "The October 3rd document has been authenticated as genuine," he said. "Therefore, the court recognizes it as the valid last will and testament of the deceased." The words hit like a thunderclap. Diana's lawyer slumped slightly in his chair. Mr. Whitaker exhaled, eyes closing for a brief second of relief. I felt my pulse in my throat. The judge continued. "As outlined in the document, the estate will be divided equally between the daughters, with a $10,000 donation to St. Mary's Church, in accordance with the decedent's wishes." He looked over his glasses directly at Diana. "And Mrs. Collins, I strongly advise you to reflect on the sanctity of trust within families. The court declines to pursue charges at this time, given the civil resolution, but understand this concealment of a will is no small matter." Diana nodded stiffly. Her lips parted, but no words came. Judge Ramsey tapped his gavel once. "Court is adjourned." It was over. I sat frozen for a moment, letting the noise of movement and murmurs wash over me. It was as if months of grief, anger, and sleepless nights had suddenly collapsed into silence. When I finally turned, Diana was gone. Only her empty chair remained. Mr. Whitaker touched my shoulder. "Justice doesn't always roar," he said softly. "Sometimes it just whispers, 'Done.'" Outside, the morning sunlight was blinding the same golden hue that had poured through Mom's kitchen window. I stood on the courthouse steps and closed my eyes, letting it warm my face. But peace didn't come immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the living room window with a cup of tea, the letter spread open on the table. I read it again and again, tracing the faded ink of my mother's handwriting. "Trust the light to show what is right." For the first time, I truly understood. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Diana stood there. No makeup, no pearls, just a plain coat and tired eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked to the kitchen where sunlight was spilling across the table, that same patch of light that always seemed to find its way to the truth. She sat down and looked at her hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her voice cracked. "I thought if I kept the will quiet, it would be easier. Mom always said I was better with money. I told myself it made sense for me to handle everything. And for me to get nothing," I asked softly. She flinched. "I didn't think about that part. I just wanted to feel like she trusted me, like she still saw me as the responsible one." There was no defense in her tone, just exhaustion. I sat across from her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "She trusted both of us. You just didn't believe that was enough." Tears filled her eyes. "I hated how you could sit with her for hours and she'd still smile. I never knew how to make her look at me that way." I sighed, the anger leaving me like air from a balloon. "You could have, Diana. You just never stayed long enough." She looked up at me, trembling. "I'm sorry." I believed her. Maybe not completely, but enough. We spent the rest of that morning going through Mom's things together. Her scarves, her books, her little ceramic angels that she kept on the windowsill. Every piece carried a memory, good and bad. By noon, the house was filled with soft conversation instead of silence. Before Diana left, she turned to me at the door. "If you want, I'll handle the donation to the church," the way she wanted. I nodded. That'd be right. She smiled faintly. "You know, sunlight really does get everywhere." After she drove off, I walked to the back porch. The air smelled like thawing earth, like winter finally giving up. I closed my eyes and let the light soak through me. For months, I'd thought revenge was about taking something back. Justice, pride, dignity. But standing there, I realized it was about restoration. Bringing balance where deceit had tilted the scales. Mom's rose bushes were starting to show green buds. I smiled. Life returning just as she'd said it would. The following week felt strangely still, like the air after a long storm, when you're not sure whether to start rebuilding or just rest. For the first time in months, I woke up without that heavy knot in my stomach. The estate papers had been processed, the accounts settled, and the donation to St. Mary's was underway. But even with justice served, peace didn't come as easily as I'd imagined. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I caught myself listening for Mom's soft humming in the kitchen, for the kettle whistle, for the sound of her slippers on the linoleum. Grief, I realized, doesn't vanish when the truth comes out. It just changes shape. 3 days after the court's decision, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery and a key. The handwriting was unmistakable Diana's. "Margaret, there's something I need to show you. The storage unit on Maple Avenue, number 24. Mom left a few things there. I can't face going alone. Please tomorrow, noon." D. I stared at the letter for a long while. My first instinct was suspicion. But then I thought of her face that day in the kitchen, the way her hands trembled when she said, "I'm sorry." There was something genuine in her, then something broken, but real. So the next day, I drove to Maple Avenue. The air was cold, but bright sunlight bouncing off the corrugated metal doors of the storage units. Diana was already there, her car idling, her coat collar turned up against the wind. She gave me a small nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," I said. Inside the unit was dim and smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, all labeled in Mom's careful handwriting, "Christmas decorations, 1982. Dad's tools. Family photos." Diana unlocked a small trunk in the corner and lifted the lid. Inside were envelopes bound with string. She kept everything, Diana whispered. Every card, every letter we ever sent her. We sat on the cold concrete floor sorting through the contents. There were old birthday cards, school photos, and a collection of dried roses wrapped in tissue paper. In one envelope, I found a photo of the three of us, Mom, Diana, and me, standing in front of the church bazaar booth. We looked so happy, wind in our hair cheeks, flushed from laughter. "She loved this picture," Diana said quietly. She said it reminded her of better days. I looked at her, her eyes glistening in the half-light, and realized how much weight she'd been carrying beneath all that pride. Maybe that was why she'd done what she did, fear of being forgotten, of being less loved. Diana reached into her coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. "I found this after the hearing," she said. "It was in one of Mom's recipe books. It's for you." My heart thudded as I opened it. Inside was a short letter written in the same careful hand. "My dear girls, if this reaches you, I hope it's together. Don't let this world make you enemies. What I leave behind isn't just money or land, it's lessons. Love without pride. Forgive without keeping score. And when the sunlight hits your face, remember that's me telling you I'm proud. Mom." I read it aloud, my voice cracking halfway through. Diana's tears fell silently onto her lap. We sat there for a long time. Two grown women who had spent too many years competing, now joined in the quiet realization of how foolish it all had been. Finally, I reached out and placed my hand over hers. "We can do better," I said. She nodded, squeezing back. "I want to." Outside, the sunlight had grown stronger, spilling through the open doorway and cutting a golden path across the dusty floor. It touched the photo in my hand, lighting up our mother's face, smiling, radiant, eternal. That evening, Diana and I drove to St. Mary's to deliver the donation check ourselves. The church was nearly empty, the scent of candles and pine lingering from the holidays. Father Raymond accepted the envelope with a gentle smile. "Your mother was a good woman," he said. "This will help a lot of families this winter." As we turned to leave, Diana stopped by the last pew, where sunlight streamed through the stained glass window. The colored light fell across her face, blue, red, and gold. She whispered almost to herself, "She'd be happy we're standing here together." I felt a lump in my throat. "Yeah," I said. She would. That night back home, I poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for the empty chair across the table. It was something Mom used to do when she missed Dad. I sat there, the steam curling upward, and whispered, "It's done, Mom. Everything's right now." The house felt lighter somehow, as if the sunlight had finally seeped into every corner, chasing away all the shadows that had been hiding there since the funeral. Spring came late that year. The Indiana fields stayed gray until April, when the grass finally began to lift its color back toward the light. The air smelled of thawed earth and rain, and the rose bushes behind Mom's old house began to sprout tiny buds, new life determined and quiet. I drove there one Sunday morning with a basket of fresh flowers and the church bulletin folded on the passenger seat. The property had sold weeks earlier, but the new owners had graciously allowed me and Diana to visit the garden whenever we wanted. "It's still your mother's spirit out there," the woman had said kindly. Diana met me at the gate. She'd started volunteering at St. Mary's every weekend, helping with the food pantry. She looked different, now softer somehow. There were lines of exhaustion around her eyes, but also something gentler. Peace, maybe. "Hey," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I brought the trowel. Thought we could plant those roses together this time." I smiled, like Mom used to do every spring. We knelt side by side, turning the soil hands, working silently, in rhythm. The air was cool, and sunlight broke through the clouds in soft patches. I remembered being little Mom, kneeling in the same spot, her voice humming an old church tune, while Diana and I chased butterflies between the rows. "She really loved this place," Diana murmured. "She did," I said, "but I think she loved us more." We planted each rose carefully, pressing the earth down around the roots. When we were done, we sat back on our heels looking at the neat row of new growth. A soft breeze carried the scent of soil and memory. After a while, Diana spoke again. "You know, I kept thinking about what she wrote. Love without pride, forgive without keeping score." She looked at me, eyes wet but steady. I don't think I ever understood what that meant until now. I nodded slowly. Maybe we both had to lose something before we could see it. She smiled faintly. "You always see things before I do." "Not always," I said gently. "Sometimes I just hold on longer." We sat there until the church bells rang in the distance, signaling the noon service. The sound echoed softly across the fields, familiar and comforting. Diana brushed dirt off her knees and stood. "You're coming to service, right? Father Raymond's talking about renewal today." "I wouldn't miss it," I said. As we walked to our cars, the sun slipped fully out from behind the clouds, spilling golden light across the house, the fields, the roses, and the road leading back to town. It wasn't dramatic or blinding, just warm, steady, the kind of light that stays. That afternoon, the church was nearly full. Families, old couples, children swinging their legs in the pews. Father Raymond spoke about forgiveness, about how true healing doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. When you forgive, he said, you don't pretend the wound never happened. You simply decide it won't define you anymore. I felt Diana's shoulder brush against mine. She wasn't crying, but her hands were clasped tight together, as if holding on to something precious. I reached over and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. For the first time in years, she didn't pull away. Later, outside the church, we stood together under the sunlight. The stained glass window behind us threw colors over our faces, blue and gold and soft rose. People passed by, greeting us, smiling politely, unaware of the story we carried between us, a story of greed, truth, and something greater than revenge. Diana turned to me, her voice quiet. "You ever think Mom planned all this?" I laughed softly. "You mean the part where we tear each other apart before learning how to forgive?" "Yeah," she said with a wry smile. "That part." "Maybe she didn't plan it," I said, looking toward the sky, but she trusted the light to handle what we couldn't. We stood there for a while, watching the sunlight ripple across the church windows, warming the bricks. Life went on around us, the sound of children, laughing birds chattering on the telephone wires, the faint hum of a car radio from the street. Everything, ordinary. Everything whole again. That evening, I went home and sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The sun was sinking low, painting the horizon in copper and rose. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the courtroom, the truth finally surfacing. But most of all, I thought about what it had given me, not victory, not triumph, but peace. As the first stars appeared, I whispered, "You were right, Mom. The sunlight always finds its way." Then turning slightly toward the camera of memory, the invisible audience I'd been speaking to all along, I said quietly, "If you've ever carried anger for too long, if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, take a breath. Let the truth come out, but don't let bitterness take root. Because revenge might win you justice, but forgiveness, that's what wins you peace." I looked once more toward the fading light, soft and golden over the roses. Share this if you've ever found your own sunlight after the storm. And remember, some stories don't end in anger, they end in grace.